Part 1. The hidden gift inside rejection. The rain had been falling for hours, soaking the streets of a small American town in the early 1900s. A young man named Samuel stood under a wooden porch, clutching a thin envelope in his trembling hands. Inside was the letter he had been waiting for, the response to his job application at the biggest company in town. His dream was simple: to work there, to earn enough to take care of his mother, and to prove to himself that he was worth something. For weeks, he had rehearsed his words, polished his shoes until they shone, and carried hope in his chest like a flame. With a deep breath, Samuel tore open the envelope. His eyes moved quickly across the words, but his heart seemed to stop beating when he read the line. "We regret to inform you." It was rejection. Plain and cold. Samuel's shoulders sank. His mind whispered cruel words: "You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You'll never succeed." The rain outside seemed to echo his thoughts, pounding harder and harder against the wooden roof above him. For hours, he sat alone, staring at the letter. He felt like the world had closed its doors on him forever. But what Samuel did not know was that this rejection was not the end. It was the beginning of a story that would change his life, and teach him a truth that millions must learn: rejection isn't final defeat. It is redirection. Lesson 1. Rejection doesn't define your worth. Weeks later, Samuel met an older man named Mr. Carter, a retired businessman who had seen many storms in life. Mr. Carter noticed Samuel's downcast spirit and asked him what was wrong. Samuel showed him the rejection letter. "They said no," he muttered. "Maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe I was foolish to even try." Mr. Carter smiled gently. "Young man, do you think a painter's work loses its beauty because one person says they don't like it?" Samuel looked puzzled. "Imagine an artist," Mr. Carter continued. "He paints a beautiful picture, pours his heart into it. One person looks at it and says, 'I don't like this painting.' Does that mean the painting has no beauty?" "Of course not," Samuel replied slowly. "Exactly," said Mr. Carter. "Rejection is the same. When someone says no, it does not mean you are worthless. It only means at that moment, in that situation, things didn't fit. A key that doesn't open one lock is not useless. It just belongs to another door." For the first time, Samuel felt a flicker of hope return. Lesson 2. Failure isn't final. Days turned into weeks, and Samuel tried again. He applied for another job, only to be turned away once more. Each rejection stung, but Mr. Carter's words echoed in his mind. "It's about fit, not failure." One evening, Mr. Carter told Samuel the story of R.U. Darby, the man who gave up digging for gold just 3 feet before striking one of the richest veins ever discovered. Darby sold his equipment and walked away, believing he was a failure. But the man who bought his claim dug a little deeper and found the treasure. Samuel leaned forward, listening intently. "You see, Samuel," Mr. Carter said, "Darby's mistake was believing rejection was final judgment. He thought the earth was saying, 'No gold for you.' But the truth was, gold was waiting, just a little further. He let rejection stop him when it should have redirected him to keep digging." Samuel's heart pounded. He realized he had been treating rejection as a wall, when in truth, it was a sign pointing him toward another path. Lesson 3. Rejection as proof of effort. One morning, as Samuel walked past the very company that had turned him away, he saw dozens of men standing outside, never daring to step in. They were waiting for opportunities to come to them, too afraid of rejection to even try. Samuel thought about it. Rejection only comes to those who act out. A man who never speaks, never asks, never tries. He never hears the word no. But he also never hears yes. Rejection, Samuel realized, was proof that he had been brave enough to try. It meant he had moved when others stood still. That day, Samuel stood taller. Every no he had received suddenly felt like a badge of courage rather than a wound. The turning point. Not long after, a friend mentioned a smaller business across town that was looking for help. At first, Samuel hesitated. It wasn't the big, prestigious company he had dreamed of. But something inside him, perhaps Mr. Carter's lessons, urged him to try anyway. He walked into the office, introduced himself, and asked if they were hiring. The manager looked him over and smiled. "We've been waiting for someone like you," he said. "When can you start?" Samuel's eyes widened. For the first time, a door had opened. Later that night, Samuel whispered to himself, "Rejection didn't break me. It redirected me." Closing thought. Rejection is not a judgment of your worth. It is not the final word on your dreams. It is life's way of pointing you toward the right doors. Samuel's journey had only just begun, but already he had discovered a secret. Every no was not punishment, it was preparation. Each rejection was carving resilience into his spirit and sharpening his vision for the right opportunities. The lesson was clear: rejection is never the end. It is the compass pointing you toward what truly belongs to you. And as Napoleon Hill once wrote, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Would you like me to continue with part 2 right away, another 1,000 words building on this story? Or should I first give you the titles/outlines for all 6 parts so you can see the full roadmap? Part 2, The Courage Hidden in Every No. The sound of typewriters filled the air inside the publishing office. The year was 1925, and Mary, a young schoolteacher with fire in her heart, walked nervously toward the receptionist's desk. In her hand, she carried a slim folder of poetry she had written late at night, after her long days of teaching children their lessons. She believed in her words. They had carried her through lonely winters and bright spring mornings. She dreamed that one day, her poems would sit on shelves across America, touching lives far beyond her small town. But dreams are often tested. The publisher glanced at her work, frowned slightly, and shook his head. Not for us, he said curtly, handing the folder back. Mary's face flushed. She managed a polite smile, but inside her heart cracked. She walked out of the office, clutching her folder as though it were suddenly heavy with shame. That night, she sat by the window, staring at the moonlight on her desk. A voice inside whispered cruelly, "Maybe your words aren't good enough. Maybe you aren't good enough." But instead of throwing her poems away, Mary did something remarkable. She placed the rejection letter in a small wooden box. She wrote the date on it, folded it neatly, and set it beside her treasured possessions. This was the first of many. Lesson 1. Rejection as a badge of honor. As months turned into years, Mary collected rejection letters like other people collected trophies. Each one was folded carefully and placed in her box. Her friends did not understand. "Why keep those painful reminders?" they asked. Mary smiled softly. "Because they prove I am in the arena. They show me I am fighting for what I believe in." This was no empty statement. Napoleon Hill himself often said that every adversity carries within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Mary believed her rejection letters were seeds. Someday, they would grow into something worthwhile. Most people avoid rejection by avoiding effort. They never send out their poems, their ideas, their inventions. They choose silence because it feels safe. But safety has a cost, a life half-lived. Mary understood the opposite. Every rejection was proof of her courage. Each no meant she had dared to step forward when it would have been easier to stay still, and that made rejection a mark of honor, not shame. Lesson 2. Rejection builds growth. Here is a simple truth. Without trying, you cannot be rejected. That much is obvious. But here is the deeper truth. Without rejection, you cannot grow. Growth comes only through resistance. Muscles grow when they push against weight. Trees grow strong because of the wind. And people grow when they push against rejection. Mary began to see rejection not as punishment but as training. Every no toughened her spirit. Every letter in her box reminded her that she was building resilience. Instead of breaking her confidence, rejection was sharpening it. Lesson 3. Rejection is a window, not a mirror. Years later, Mary told me something I never forgot. "Most people," she said, "make the mistake of treating rejection like a mirror. They believe every no shows them who they really are. They think rejection reflects their worth, their flaws, their destiny." She leaned forward, her eyes steady. "But rejection isn't a mirror. It's a window. It shows you how someone else sees the world. It's about their tastes, their needs, their perspective, not your value." To prove her point, she told me the story of a craftsman she once knew. He built furniture with his own hands, each piece sturdy, simple, and full of character. One day, he showed his work to a wealthy buyer who dismissed it instantly. "Too plain," the man said. "I prefer decoration and detail." The craftsman nearly gave up that day. But soon after, another buyer saw the same furniture and exclaimed, "This is exactly what I've been searching for. Authentic. Beautiful in its simplicity. I'll pay double." Mary smiled. See? The first man's rejection was not truth about the furniture. It was a window into his own preferences. The furniture never changed. Only the eyes looking at it did. Lesson 4. rejection sharpens vision. Mary's own path echoed that lesson. For years, rejection had felt like darkness, scattering her direction. But over time, she realized it was sharpening her vision. Each no cut away the paths that weren't right for her, just as a sculptor's hammer chips away the stone to reveal the statue inside. The publishers who turned her away weren't destroying her dream. They were refining it. They were forcing her to grow sharper, clearer, and more determined. What felt like loss was actually life carving away illusions, leaving only the essence of her true purpose. The breakthrough. 10 years after her first rejection, Mary received a letter that was different. A small press in Chicago had read her poetry. They loved it. They wanted to publish her book. When the day came and her first book of poems was printed, Mary did not look at the new pages first. She opened her wooden box of rejection letters. She spread them across the table, each one a stepping stone to this moment. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "Thank you." Those rejections were not chains that held her back. They were weights that had made her stronger. They were not insults. They were invitations to grow. Without them, she might have quit too soon. Without them, she would never have reached the readers who would one day laugh, cry, and find hope in her words. Closing thought. Mary's story teaches us what Napoleon Hill knew well. Rejection is never the end. It is the hidden hand that pushes you toward your true destiny. Every no you hear is proof that you dared to try. Every refusal is a lesson shaping you into who you must become. The next time rejection knocks at your door, remember Mary and her wooden box. See it not as a mirror of your worth but as a window into another person's world. And above all, remember this: rejection is not proof of weakness. It is proof of courage. For only the brave ever hear the word no. Do you want me to now continue with part 3, building on this theme? Or would you like me to first outline all 6 parts with their key lessons so you can see the big picture of the whole series? Part 3. How rejection refines your true calling. The theater lights dimmed, and a young man walked onto the stage. His palms were sweaty, his heart pounding. For as long as he could remember, he had dreamed of being a singer. He believed this was his destiny. He practiced for hours, entered every competition he could find, and sang with all the passion in his soul. Tonight was another audition, a chance to prove himself, a chance to be discovered. But when the final note faded, the judges shook their heads. "Not the right fit," they said, the words cut like knives. He forced a smile, thanked them, and left the stage. But inside, something broke. Another no. Another door slammed shut. Walking home through the dark streets, he asked himself, why does life keep rejecting me? What he didn't know was that rejection was not ending his dream. It was reshaping it. Lesson 1. The secret hidden in disappointment. At first, he wrote songs just to ease his frustration. Words spilled onto the page, melodies poured from his guitar. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply pouring his soul into music. But something surprising happened. His songs had power. They carried emotions that touched people in ways his singing never had. One day, a fellow performer heard one of his songs and asked, "Can I record this?" Then another singer wanted one. Soon, his music was being performed by voices stronger than his own, reaching audiences he had only dreamed of. The rejection that once felt like destruction had revealed his true calling. He was not meant to be the man standing under the spotlight. He was meant to be the one who created the light, through music that lived in the hearts of millions. Napoleon Hill often said that every setback carries within it the seed of equal or greater opportunity. That was exactly what had happened. Lesson 2. Ask the right question. The turning point in this man's life came when he changed the question he was asking. For years he had asked, "Why is this happening to me?" That question only deepened his pain. It made him feel like a victim, powerless against cruel circumstances. But when he finally asked, "What clarity has this rejection given me?" everything shifted. Suddenly, rejection was no longer punishment. It was guidance. Each no was pointing him away from illusions and toward his real gift. The moment you begin asking the right question, rejection changes from a curse into a compass. Lesson 3. Rejection as weight training for the soul. People often believe rejection weakens them. They imagine that every no chips away at their confidence until nothing is left. But this belief is backwards. Rejection is weight training for the soul. Just as muscles grow stronger when they lift heavy resistance, your spirit grows stronger when it lifts the weight of disappointment. At first, the strain feels painful. You feel sore, tired, even defeated. But beneath the surface, you are growing. With each rejection, your inner strength deepens. Think about it, the weight that once felt impossible eventually becomes easy. In the same way, the rejection that once crushed you becomes something you can carry with grace. And with every repetition, you become more resilient, more capable, more unbreakable. Lesson 4. The Craftsman's Secret. I once knew a young man who dreamed of becoming a master craftsman. He applied for apprenticeships with the best masters he could find. The first one turned him away. The second barely looked at his work. The third told him flatly, "You are not ready." Most people would have quit. But this man did something different. He took every rejection as instruction. If the first master thought he lacked skill, he practiced harder. If the second ignored him, he studied great works late into the night. If the third said, "Not ready," he pushed himself until he was. Day by day, he transformed rejection into fuel. His hands grew steadier, his eyes sharper, his work finer. By the time he approached the fourth master, he was no longer a beginner. His dedication spoke louder than words. The master accepted him immediately. But here's the twist. When he entered the workshop, he realized he was already ahead of many apprentices who had been accepted earlier. Their path had been easier, but his rejections had forced him to build strength and discipline they lacked. Rejection had not weakened him. It had forged him into someone undeniable. Lesson 5. Rejection expands your vision. Many people believe rejection shrinks their world, closing off opportunities. But the truth is the opposite. Rejection expands your perspective. I remember a young woman who dreamed of joining a famous performance group. She shaped her entire life around this single goal. She studied their style, practiced their routines, and molded herself into what she thought they wanted. But when she auditioned, they rejected her. At first, she was devastated. Her whole future seemed gone. But because her plan had collapsed, she was forced to look around. She discovered other teachers, new styles, and traditions she had never considered before. She traveled, learned, and experimented. Eventually, she developed her own unique style, so distinctive that people from all over the world came to learn from her. If she had been accepted into that group, she might have spent her life imitating others. But rejection freed her to create something truly original. Lesson 6. Rejection as silent guidance. Acceptance feels good, but it can trap you on the wrong path. Rejection, on the other hand, quietly redirects you toward your true purpose. I once met a young athlete who trained hard in a popular sport. He tried out for the team but was rejected. At first, he felt crushed. But while searching for something else, he discovered another sport, one that fit his natural talents perfectly. Within a few years, he wasn't just playing. He was excelling, winning championships, and inspiring others. That first rejection wasn't punishment. It was silent guidance, pointing him toward the field where he truly belonged. Closing thought. The stories of the singer-turned-composer, the determined craftsman, the rejected performer, and the young athlete all revealed the same truth. Rejection is not the end of your dream. It is the force that refines it. It does not break you down, it builds you up. It does not close your future, it opens doors you never imagined. It does not reveal your weakness, it reveals your hidden strength. The next time life says no, do not hang your head. Instead, ask the right question: what clarity has this given me? What strength can I build from it? Where else might it lead me? If you hold fast to those questions, you will discover what Mary, the craftsman, the composer, and so many others have learned. Rejection is not your enemy. Rejection is your teacher. And when you embrace its lessons, rejection becomes the very thing that carries you to greatness. Would you like me to now outline the 6 parts with their themes and lessons so you can see the full structure of the series before I continue writing part 4? Part 4. The Silent Strength of Self-Mastery. David sat on the edge of his bed one early morning, staring at the faint glow of dawn through the curtains. The house was quiet. No phones ringing, no voices calling, no world demanding his attention. It was the kind of silence that most people filled with distractions. But David had started to learn something Napoleon Hill often hinted at. True power was not found in the noise of the world but in the stillness of the mind. He remembered a phrase from one of Hill's lessons. Control yourself, and you control your destiny. At first, David thought self-control meant saying no to desserts, or working long hours without rest. But as he reflected, he realized it was much deeper. Self-mastery was about ruling the inner world, the mind, emotions, and desires, so that no storm outside could shake the foundation inside. The first test, anger at work. Later that day, David walked into the factory where he worked as a supervisor. Machines roared, Men shouted over the clanging iron, and the air smelled of oil and sweat. One of the younger workers, Tom, approached him with a scowl. "David, the new shipment is late again. We can't keep the line running." Tom snapped. The old David would have raised his voice, matching fire with fire. But instead, David paused. He remembered Hill's teaching. If you cannot master your emotions will master you. David took a slow breath. Tom, I understand. Let's adjust the schedule and focus on what we can control right now. Complaining won't speed up that shipment, but smart planning might save us. Tom blinked, surprised. His anger softened. All right, let's try that. David felt a quiet victory. Not over Tom, but over himself. His silence in the heat of the moment had carried more strength than any loud outburst could. The second test, the pull of comfort that evening. After dinner, David sat at his desk. His notebook lay open with goals written in clear ink: financial independence, stronger health, a deeper spiritual life. But his body leaned toward the soft couch, the tempting glow of the television. Just 1 hour of rest won't hurt, his mind whispered. But then he remembered Hill's principle. Every man is where he is, and what he is, because of his established habits of thought. David realized the couch wasn't the enemy. The real enemy was the small compromise, the habit of giving in to comfort over purpose. He closed his eyes, pictured his goals, and said aloud, "Not tonight." He opened his notebook and began writing ideas for a side business he had been considering. Each word he wrote felt like a brick laid on the foundation of his future. The third test, a friend's doubt on Sunday. David met his old friend Michael at the diner. Over coffee, Michael leaned back and shook his head. "David, you're working too hard. Life's short. Why waste energy chasing dreams that probably won't happen?" David stirred his coffee slowly. The old David would have argued, trying to convince Michael. But Napoleon Hill had taught him another truth. Don't announce your dreams to small minds. Protect your vision as you would a treasure. So instead of debating, David smiled. "I appreciate your concern, Michael. But I believe every effort I make is leading me somewhere worthwhile." Michael shrugged, unconvinced. But David felt no need to explain further. His silence was not weakness, it was strength. For he knew that his vision didn't need the approval of anyone but himself. The power of inner discipline. Weeks passed, and David's discipline began to show results. His finances improved because he started saving consistently. His health grew stronger because he walked every morning before work. His relationships improved because he no longer let anger control his tongue. One evening, as he looked at his growing savings ledger and the notes of his side business plan, he realized something powerful. Success was not a sudden explosion. It was the quiet result of daily discipline. He whispered to himself. Master yourself, and the world cannot master you. A storm outside, calm inside. A few months later, the factory faced a sudden crisis. The owner announced that wages might be cut due to losses. The workers panicked. Some shouted angrily, others talked about quitting. David stood before them, calm as a still lake. He didn't deny the problem, but he reminded them that anger wouldn't feed their families. He spoke of unity, creativity, and finding solutions together. The workers listened, not because David had authority, but because his calm presence carried weight. He had become, in their eyes, a man unshaken by storms. Reflection. That night, David sat by the window, watching the stars. He thought about his journey. At first, he wanted quick results: money, success, recognition. But Napoleon Hill's words had reshaped him. Before you can conquer the world, you must first conquer yourself. David realized the greatest victory wasn't in his growing savings or business plans. It was in his ability to master his thoughts, emotions, and actions. The silent strength of self-mastery had become his shield, his compass, and his secret weapon. He smiled, whispering into the night. I am no longer ruled by the outside world. I rule myself, and that is the beginning of everything. Would you like me to continue with part 5 tomorrow, carrying forward the same flow, 1,000 words, story style, Napoleon Hill's principles? Part 5. The furnace within the old mill furnace still stood in town, though no longer in use. Jacob often walked past it on his way home, staring at its towering chimney. Years ago, it burned day and night, shaping steel for the railroad tracks that carried men westward. The fire within was fierce, relentless, and unyielding. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jacob paused before the furnace. Something about its silent strength spoke to him. He remembered his grandfather's words. Every man carries his own furnace within. Feed it with faith, discipline, and purpose, and it will forge greatness. Starve it with doubt and idleness, and it will grow cold. Those words burned into Jacob's mind as he stood there. He realized his life was a furnace, and lately, he had been careless with what he put into it. Some days he stoked it with ambition. Other days, he smothered it with fear and hesitation. That night, he couldn't sleep. He turned in bed, restless, hearing Napoleon Hill's timeless echo in his heart. Strength and growth come only through continuous effort and struggle. The test of fire. The next morning, Jacob woke before dawn. The town was still asleep, but he felt something stirring inside. He pulled on his boots, stepped outside, and walked to the fields beyond the river. The dew was heavy on the grass, and the world was silent except for the soft rush of water. Standing there, Jacob clenched his fists. He whispered to himself, "This is my furnace. My life will burn with purpose, or it will turn to ash. The choice is mine." From that moment, Jacob committed himself to a new discipline. He would rise earlier. He would plan his day with intention. He would feed his mind first, before the world's noise tried to consume him. Every day, he would write 3 goals, speak them aloud, and work until sweat proved his sincerity. But the furnace soon tested him. The following week, rain poured down for days, drowning the fields where he worked. The tools grew heavy with mud, and his body ached from lifting and bending. Worse, whispers from neighbors began again. "Jacob works too hard for too little. Dreamers don't eat. They starve. He'll burn himself out." Every word was a splash of cold water, threatening to smother his flame. But Jacob remembered Hill's warning. Most great people have attained their greatest success just one step beyond their greatest failure. So Jacob pressed on, even when his back screamed with pain and his hands bled from the shovel. He learned to smile at the rain. He learned to welcome the ache in his muscles as proof that his furnace still burned. The sparks of influence. One evening, while Jacob carried a load of wood, his younger cousin Eli stopped him. "Why do you work like this?" Eli asked. "You could settle down, take an easier job in town. Nobody would blame you." Jacob looked at him, sweat dripping from his brow. "Eli, every man feeds his furnace with something. Some feed it with comfort. Some with fear. But comfort produces only smoke. Fear produces only ash. I've chosen to feed mine with effort and faith. One day, this fire will forge something greater than you can see now." Eli didn't answer, but his eyes softened. In that moment, Jacob realized something. His example was sparking fires in others, even if they didn't admit it yet. Napoleon Hill once wrote that enthusiasm is contagious. Jacob's steady determination was beginning to spread like sparks carried by the wind. The furnace and the vision weeks turned into months. Jacob's discipline grew stronger. He no longer waited for motivation. He relied on habit. He no longer doubted when storms came. He relied on faith. One night, exhausted but fulfilled, Jacob returned to the old furnace. The moonlight cast long shadows on its iron walls. He placed his hand against the cold surface and whispered, "You once forged steel for the railroad. Now you forge me." And in that stillness, he saw a vision, clearer than any dream. He saw himself standing tall, no longer doubting, no longer bending to the weight of fear. He saw a man who had fed his furnace with faith, effort, and purpose until the fire glowed unshakable. That vision filled him with a new kind of strength, not the strength of muscle, but the strength of spirit. The strength that Napoleon Hill described as burning desire, backed by faith, translated into persistence. The lesson of the furnace. From that day on, Jacob lived with a fiery certainty. He learned 3 lessons from the furnace that every soul must one day face. 1. The fire must be fed daily. Effort, discipline, and intention are the fuel. Miss a day, and the flame weakens. 2. The fire must be protected. Doubt, fear, and negative voices are the wind that can blow it out. Guard it fiercely. 3. The fire must be shared. One spark can ignite another. A single example of faith and persistence can change lives. Jacob's journey was far from over, but his furnace now burned brighter than ever. He understood what his grandfather meant all those years ago. He carried his furnace within him, and no storm, no critic, no failure could ever extinguish it. As he walked home that night, his steps were steady, his eyes clear. He whispered to himself the truth that had become his shield. "My fire is mine. My purpose is mine. And with it, I will forge my destiny. And somewhere in the silence of the night, it seemed as if the old furnace itself agreed, standing tall as a reminder that true strength is not found in comfort, but in the fire of struggle, effort, and unshakable faith. White heavy check mark. That's part 5, 1000 words, of your Napoleon Hill inspired motivational story series. Would you like me to now prepare part 6, final? With a powerful conclusion plus direct call to action for your YouTube audience. Subscribe, share, comment. Part 6. The victory within the night was quiet in Riverbend, but John couldn't sleep. He sat by his small desk with a single candle burning. In front of him lay the first blueprint of his business, a plan he had worked on for years. It was smudged, worn, and marked with endless notes. Every line told a story of failure, lessons, and persistence. John remembered his early days when he was just a dreamer with no clear plan. He had believed success was about luck or waiting for the right time. But as the years went on, through hardship, through hunger, through rejection, he had learned a truth: the victory was never outside, it was always inside. He thought of Napoleon Hill's words that had guided him. Success begins with definiteness of purpose. Every setback carries within it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. What the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. These weren't just sentences in a book anymore. They had become John's life. The final test. The next morning, John faced the biggest challenge yet. A powerful businessman from the city had offered to buy his small workshop. The price was tempting, more money than John had ever seen. His friends encouraged him to take it. Think of what you could do with this money, they said. You could finally rest. But John knew this was a test. If he sold his dream, he would also sell his purpose. And purpose was worth more than gold. So he closed his eyes, breathed deeply, and asked himself, would Napoleon Hill have told me to quit when success was near? Would he tell me to trade vision for comfort? The answer was clear. He smiled and said to the businessman, "Thank you, sir, but I cannot sell what I was born to build. This dream is not for sale." The man left, shaking his head. But John felt lighter than ever. The breakthrough weeks passed, and Riverbend changed. People began noticing John's work. His small workshop, once ignored, became a place of hope. Young men came to learn his skills. Families brought their savings, trusting his ideas. One morning, as John unlocked the door, he found a crowd waiting outside. They weren't there to mock him anymore. They wanted to join him. They wanted to build with him. That day, John realized something important. Success isn't about one man winning. It's about lifting others too. He gave jobs to those who had once laughed at him. He trained the poor boys who had no future. He even shared food with the same families who once doubted him. Riverbend slowly transformed. What was once a struggling town now became a place of energy, hope, and growth. And at the center of it was John, the man who refused to quit. The mountain. Years later, John stood on the hill overlooking Riverbend. His workshop had grown into a company. His name was known beyond the town. But what gave him the deepest joy wasn't the money or the fame. It was the knowledge that he had mastered himself. He had learned patience when things were slow. He had learned courage when fear tried to stop him. He had learned faith when nothing made sense. Standing on that hill, he whispered, "The mountain wasn't outside me. It was inside me. And I have climbed it." The lessons. Before leaving Riverbend for the city to expand his vision, John gathered the young men he had trained. They sat around him like students before a teacher. He spoke simply, not like a businessman, but like a mentor. "Remember these lessons, because they built my life. 1. Know your purpose. Without purpose, you are like a ship without a sail. 2. Guard your mind. What you allow inside your thoughts shapes your future. 3. Turn defeat into fuel. Every failure has a lesson that can lift you higher. 4. Persist without excuse. The man who refuses to quit cannot be defeated. 5. Lift others as you climb. Real success is shared, not kept." The young men nodded, their eyes bright with fire. John smiled. He knew they understood. The seed had been planted. The victory within. Years later, John's name was written in books. People called him a visionary. But if you asked John where the real victory was, he would say, "It wasn't in the buildings I raised or the wealth I gained. The real victory was within, over my doubts, my fears, my excuses. Once I mastered myself, the world could not stop me." And so, his story became proof of Napoleon Hill's greatest teaching. Success is not about waiting for opportunity. It is about becoming the kind of person who creates it. Final reflection. John's journey shows us what Napoleon Hill taught for a lifetime. Success is a mindset, a discipline, a way of life. The tools are within us: purpose, faith, persistence, and self-mastery. When we use them, no circumstance, no failure, and no critic can hold us back. The world may try to buy your dream, laugh at your dream, or bury your dream. But if you stand firm, if you believe, if you act daily with discipline, one day you will rise. And like John, you will whisper, "The mountain was within me, and I have climbed it." White heavy checkmark. Call to action. If John's story inspired you, then don't just stop here. Carry these lessons into your own life. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe for more powerful motivational stories. Backhand index pointing right. Share this with someone who needs courage today. Backhand index pointing right. Comment your thoughts below. What mountain are you climbing right now? Your journey matters. Your purpose matters. And your victory, like John's, begins within.